All right, let's kick off this deep dive. And, we're going to be unpacking something we all experience but might not think too much about.
Yeah.
Talking about the weather in English. We've got a mix of stuff here. Language learning guides, real conversations, and even some cultural insights.
Right.
All to help you go beyond just a simple, it's sunny,
Exactly.
So by the end of this, you'll be able to weave in some idioms, navigate weather chat like a pro, pretty much.
It's fascinating how even simple things like weather talk can reveal so much about a language and culture.
I agree.
Take the basic questions like, how's the weather? Or what's the forecast? We see those across all of our sources, and they're really more than just requests for info.
Yeah, it's true. They're almost like a social script, right?
Exactly.
It's a way to initiate conversation.
Yeah.
But what happens when we want to move beyond those basic phrases?
That's where things get interesting.
Okay.
That's where we start to see more descriptive language come in, more idioms. For example, an easy guide to talking about weather in English mentions phrases like boiling hot or freezing, which just add a bit more color.
Right.
And then there's the classic raining cats and dogs.
Oh, yeah, that one always makes me chuckle.
Oh, yeah.
It's so illogical, but it's so vivid,
Right.
Actually, I wonder, where did that come from? Do you have any insights into the origins of weather idioms like that?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
The origin of that one is actually debated, but one theory goes back to 17th century England.
Okay.
If you can imagine, open sewers overflowing with dead animals during heavy downpours.
Oh.
Not the prettiest picture, but it might explain the imagery.
Wow, that's a bit grim.
Yeah.
But definitely memorable.
Right.
And it highlights how language evolves, right?
Absolutely.
It reflects the environment and even history of a place.
And it reminds us that these idioms, they can be tricky for language learners.
Yeah.
Because they often defy literal translation.
Yeah.
But mastering them adds a layer of authenticity to your speech.
Speaking of authenticity, let's go from the theoretical to the practical.
Okay.
We have a clip from a YouTube video by English.
Okay.
It's called English Conversation Training.
Yeah.
It shows how native speakers use weather talk, in casual greetings. So as you listen, pay attention not just to the words,
right,
but how the speaker uses intonation, even stresses certain words to convey meaning and emotion.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm noticing how she contracts words like, how you doing?
Yeah.
It definitely sounds more natural and relaxed than the full, how are you doing?
Those little nuances are key to sounding more fluent. It's not just about knowing the right vocabulary.
Right.
It's about capturing the rhythm and the flow of natural speech.
Now, I know we have some sources that touch on regional differences in weather talk.
Yes.
And I'm really excited to get into that because weather experiences can vary drastically depending on where you live, right?
Absolutely. We have some notes here about how people in the U.S. Northeast might talk about nor'easters,
right,
while Californians use marine layer.
Right, and it's so interesting how language adapts to these specific weather patterns of a region.
Yeah.
And it's not just vocab, I imagine. There are also cultural nuances in how people discuss weather.
You're right.
Yeah.
For instance, our source, ESL Weather Conversation, presents a scenario where Tui, who is from Thailand, is experiencing snow for the first time.
Okay.
So it highlights how our personal experiences shape our worldview and can lead to some pretty fascinating conversations when we meet people from different backgrounds.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Sharing those experiences and perspectives can be a way to connect with others and learn about different cultures.
Exactly.
But what if we want to move beyond, that casual chit-chat?
Yeah.
What if we want to talk about the weather in a more sophisticated way?
That's where vocabulary choice comes in.
Right.
Instead of just hot, you could use scorching or sweltering. And for a strong wind, maybe gale or blustery.
I see.
Yeah.
So it's about choosing words that are both accurate and kind of evocative.
Absolutely.
And it reminds me, we haven't even touched on climate change yet.
Oh, right.
Which is a huge topic these days.
Yeah, climate change is no longer just small talk. It's a global issue.
Right.
That requires its own set of vocabulary. We have a YouTube video here called How to Talk About Climate Change in English.
Okay.
Which introduces terms like carbon footprint and renewable energy.
Yeah, those are terms that we hear all the time.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing most people wouldn't be able to give you a clear definition.
Right.
If you ask them,
Yeah, it's easy to get swept up in the jargon without really understanding
right, exactly.
the concepts.
So understanding those terms is crucial, not only for language fluency, but for engaging in meaningful discussions about this very real and pressing issue.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've covered quite a bit already.
Yeah.
From basic phrases to descriptive language and even this climate change vocab.
Yeah.
Where do we go from here?
Well, since we've touched on how personal experiences kind of shape our weather conversations, let's explore how weather influences our everyday lives,
Okay.
particularly our hobbies and leisure activities.
That's a great segue. We have a video from Oxford Online English called How to Talk About Your Free Time and Hobbies in English.
Yeah.
And they actually discuss how weather affects activity choices.
It's so relatable.
Yeah.
If it's pouring rain, you're probably going to opt for that movie marathon instead of the hike you planned.
Right, right.
And being able to express how weather impacts your hobbies makes for more engaging and personal conversation.
It definitely adds another dimension.
Right.
Instead of just saying, I like to play tennis. You could say, I love playing tennis, but the wind can be a real challenge.
Exactly. Shows that you're thinking about that connection between weather and your personal interests.
Yeah.
And can spark further discussion.
Right.
Create some common ground.
Okay, I'm feeling much more equipped to handle these weather conversations now.
Good.
But before we get too confident, maybe we should talk about some common mistakes people make when talking about the weather.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
I know I've been guilty of a few myself.
Avoiding those common pitfalls can help you sound more fluent, more confident.
Okay.
Our source, Weather in English, 165 top phrases to make learning a breeze, has a whole section dedicated to this.
Okay.
For example, many learners confuse hot with warm. They're both positive temperatures.
Right.
But hot implies a much higher intensity.
Yeah, those subtle distinctions.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
And speaking of precision, what about pronunciation?
Oh, yeah, good point.
Are there any words that commonly trip people up?
Definitely.
Weather vocabulary can be challenging.
Yeah.
Words like humidity, thunderstorm often cause pronunciation issues.
Yes, I could see that.
This source gives some tips on how to break down these words, pronounce them correctly,
Right.
which can significantly impact your overall fluency.
So we've talked about vocabulary, idioms, regional variations, and even pronunciation.
It's a lot.
Yeah, it feels like we've covered so much ground already.
Yeah.
But is there anything else we should keep in mind when it comes to weather talk?
One crucial aspect we haven't really discussed yet is how to keep a weather conversation going.
Okay.
It's not just about exchanging information.
Yeah.
It's about engaging with the other person and building a connection.
That's so important.
Right.
I've definitely had those conversations that just fizzle out after the initial, how's the weather?
That's all of us.
Yeah, how do we avoid that awkward silence?
Our source, Spoken English Conversation, talking about the weather, offers some great advice.
Okay.
It suggests asking follow-up questions, like what's your favorite type of weather? Or how does this weather affect your plans for the weekend? Those kinds of questions can keep the conversation flowing.
Yeah.
Help you learn more about the other person.
It's about showing genuine interest.
Yeah.
Finding common ground.
Absolutely.
Which goes beyond just talking about the weather itself, right?
Right.
It's about using the weather as a springboard for a more meaningful conversation.
Exactly. And our source, talking about weather in English weather conversation, emphasizes that weather is a universal topic.
Yes.
Everyone experiences it, regardless of background or culture.
Right.
So it's a great way to break the ice and connect with people.
That's a great reminder.
Yeah.
Sometimes we overthink these things.
Yeah.
But weather is something we all have in common.
Right.
It can be that starting point for a friendly chat, a cultural exchange, or even a deeper discussion
Absolutely.
about these global issues.
And now that we've covered so much, from basic phrases to keeping those conversations flowing, I think it's time to tackle a really fun aspect of weather talk.
Okay, what's that?
Idioms.
Ooh, yes. Idioms. They're like the secret code of a language.
They are.
They add so much color and personality.
Absolutely.
I'm excited to learn more about them.
Our source, talking about weather in English, break into English, gives us a whole list of weather-related idioms.
Right?
Some, like raining cats and dogs, under the weather, are pretty well known.
Those are classics.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there are some lesser-known ones
Yeah.
that could really surprise us.
We'll see.
What else do we have?
Well, how about break the ice or weather the storm?
Right.
These idioms use weather imagery to express abstract ideas and emotions.
That's fascinating.
It is.
So learning these idioms, it can make you sound more fluent,
Yeah.
but also give you a deeper understanding of the culture and thinking behind the language.
Absolutely.
But how do we actually use them in conversation without sounding, forced or unnatural?
That's a common challenge.
Yeah.
In our source, improve your speaking skills by talking about the weather offers a solution. Role-playing.
Okay.
Imagine you're talking to a colleague at work or chatting with a friend at a party. By practicing those different scenarios,
Right.
you can get comfortable using these idioms naturally and authentically.
That's a great idea.
Right.
Role-playing allows you to experiment with different phrases and find what feels right for you. And it helps you think about the different ways we talk about the weather, depending on, the context and who we're talking to.
Exactly. It's about adapting your language to the situation.
Right.
Whether you're making casual chit-chat or having a more serious discussion.
Okay, so do you feel like you've got a handle on idioms now?
I think so.
It's amazing how something as simple as the weather can lead to such a deep dive into language, culture, and even psychology.
It really is.
Yeah.
And we haven't even scratched the surface of how weather's depicted in literature, art, and music.
Right.
But that's maybe a deep dive for another day.
Definitely. For now, I think we've given our listener plenty to think about and practice.
I agree.
We've explored everything from basic vocabulary to complex idioms, regional variations, even the impact of weather on our lives.
Absolutely.
But there's one fascinating area we haven't explored yet, and that is how people in different English-speaking countries talk about the weather.
Oh, that's a good one.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's fascinating how the same language can have such distinct flavors depending on where it's spoken.
Absolutely.
We have a source, pasted text, that dedicates an entire chapter to this.
Okay.
It compares weather conversations in the U.S., UK, Australia, and Canada.
Interesting.
Revealing some surprising differences from vocabulary choices to cultural attitudes towards the weather.
Right.
I'm so curious, what are some of the key differences they highlight?
Well, for starters, the UK is known for its understatement. So while an American might complain about a downpour, someone from the UK might just simply describe it as a bit of rain.
That's so funny. It's amazing how cultural norms can influence even something as seemingly objective as the weather.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about Australians? I imagine they have some colorful slang terms for those scorching summers.
You're absolutely right.
Right.
Australians tend to be more casual and use slang like scorcher for a hot day or stinker for a particularly unpleasant one.
I love that. It's a reminder that language isn't just about conveying information, it's about expressing a culture's personality.
Absolutely.
What about Canadians? Given their, notoriously harsh winters, I imagine they have a whole vocabulary for describing those freezing temps.
Absolutely. Canadians are no strangers to extreme cold, and their language definitely reflects that they might use terms like snow squall or wind chill with a level of familiarity that would make someone from a warmer climate shiver just hearing it.
Those are great examples. It's amazing how the same language can be used so differently depending on the region. It makes you realize how much we can learn about a culture just by listening to how they talk about the weather.
Exactly. It's a reminder that language is constantly evolving and adapting to its environment, both physical and cultural.
Yeah.
It highlights the importance of being aware of these nuances when you're communicating with people from different backgrounds.
Okay, so we've explored regional variations.
Yeah.
But what about specific types of weather? I'm always a bit lost when it comes to, understanding the different categories of storms and precipitation.
Yeah.
It feels like there are so many terms, and they all sound so technical.
Don't worry, you're not alone.
Okay.
Those terms can be confusing even for native speakers.
Right.
Luckily, our source, pasted text, breaks down the terminology for different weather patterns and phenomena.
Okay.
From thunderstorms to blizzards to hurricanes.
That's so helpful. It's like a mini meteorology lesson right here.
It is.
And I bet learning these terms will not only make us sound more knowledgeable, but also help us better understand, those weather forecasts and reports.
Exactly. Once you grasp the basic terminology, you can decipher those forecasts with more confidence and even impress your friends with your newfound knowledge of high-pressure systems and wind speeds.
I'll try not to get too carried away. But it is fascinating to learn about the science behind the weather.
It is.
It gives you a deeper appreciation for the complexity of nature and how it impacts our lives.
Absolutely.
In so many ways.
It does.
So now that we've covered regional variations, specific weather events, and even a little bit of meteorology,
Yeah.
Let's see if there are any other, like, nuggets of wisdom we can glean from our sources.
Let's talk about how to incorporate weather into conversations about different seasons.
Right.
Each season has its own unique weather patterns and activities. And talking about those can enrich our conversations, make them more relatable.
That's a great idea. Because it's natural to connect weather with the seasons.
Right.
For example, in the spring, we might talk about, blooming flowers and enjoying picnics in the park. While in autumn, we might discuss, the changing leaves and crisp autumn air.
Exactly.
Right.
Our source pasted text provides some helpful examples of how to weave these seasonal references into our conversations, making them more vivid and engaging.
Right.
It's about painting a picture with your words, evoking the sensory experiences associated with each season.
Okay, I'm feeling like a true weather conversationalist now.
Good.
We've covered so much. From basic phrases to regional variations, extreme weather events, and even the science behind it all. I feel like I've gained a whole new level of fluency and confidence when it comes to talking about the weather.
That's great.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, maybe we should revisit those do's and don'ts.
Oh, yeah. Good idea.
Of weather conversations. We want to make sure our listeners are equipped to use all this knowledge effectively.
Right.
And avoid any weather-related faux pas. Our source-pasted text offers some great tips on how to adapt your weather talk to different social settings.
Okay.
From casual gatherings to formal meetings.
Right.
It's all about reading the room. And adjusting your tone and vocabulary.
Exactly.
I know I've definitely made the mistake of launching into a detailed weather report when the other person was just trying to make polite small talk.
We've all been there.
Yeah, right. But as a general rule, in casual settings, it's fine to be more enthusiastic, share personal anecdotes, and even crack a few jokes.
Right.
But in those formal settings, it's best to keep it polite, neutral, and avoid oversharing.
Yeah.
So it's all about striking that right balance between being engaging and respectful of the context.
Absolutely.
This has been such an enlightening deep dive so far. I feel like I've not only expanded my vocabulary, but also gained a deeper appreciation for the nuances of weather talk and how it can be such a powerful tool for connection and communication.
I completely agree.
And as we move into the next part of our deep dive, remember that the key is to practice. And have fun with it.
Absolutely.
Pay attention to how people around you use weather language, experiment with new phrases, and don't be afraid to make mistakes.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Learning a language, especially its idioms and cultural nuances. It's a journey, not a destination.
Right.
And the best way to learn is by embracing the process.
Yeah.
Even those occasional stumbles along the way.
Right.
We'll be back soon with more fascinating insights into the world of weather talk.
Okay.
Stay tuned.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. Welcome back. Ready to dive into more fascinating weather talk?
Absolutely. What we got next?
Well, we've talked about all sorts of things, vocabulary, grammar, even pronunciation.
Yeah.
But there's one crucial element we haven't discussed yet, and that's how to adapt our weather talk to different social settings.
Oh, that's a good point.
Right. Because a casual chat with a friend is going to be totally different from, let's say, a formal presentation at work.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. It's all about reading the room.
Exactly.
Adjusting your tone, your content accordingly.
Our source pasted text has some really excellent tips on navigating these social nuances.
Okay.
It really emphasizes matching your language to the formality of the occasion.
So in a casual setting, like a backyard barbecue or a coffee date, it's fine to be more relaxed, share personal anecdotes, maybe even use some humor.
Exactly.
But in a formal setting, like a business meeting or a conference presentation, it's probably best to keep it professional.
Keep it neutral.
And stick to objective observations about the weather.
Exactly. Strike that balance between being engaging but also respectful of the context.
For example, while it might be appropriate to joke about sweating buckets with your friends on a hot day.
Yeah.
Probably not the best choice of words when you're addressing your boss.
Yeah, or a client.
Or a client, right.
Right.
So it highlights the importance of being mindful of our language choices and how they can impact those interactions.
And I imagine cultural differences play a role here, too.
Oh, absolutely. What's considered appropriate in one culture might be totally off limits in another.
For example, in some cultures, complaining about the weather is a big no-no.
Right.
Whereas in others, it's perfectly acceptable.
It's true.
So it's a good reminder that even something as seemingly universal as weather can be viewed through these different cultural lenses.
It really underscores the importance of being culturally sensitive
Yeah.
and aware when we're engaging in these conversations.
Especially with people from different backgrounds.
Okay, so we've talked about social settings and cultural differences.
Yeah.
What about, like, specific types of weather? I'm always a bit lost when it comes to understanding the different categories of storms and precipitation.
Right.
It feels like there are so many terms.
There are.
And they all sound so technical.
Don't worry, you're not alone.
Okay.
Those terms can be confusing even for native speakers.
Okay.
But luckily, our source, pasted text, breaks down the terminology
All right.
for different weather patterns and phenomena,
Okay.
from thunderstorms to blizzards to hurricanes.
That's helpful.
It is.
Because I'd love to be able to confidently discuss these different weather events
Yeah.
without feeling like I'm fumbling over the right words.
Our source provides some really helpful definitions
Okay.
and explanations so you can understand the key characteristics of each phenomenon.
Okay.
You'll learn the difference between, for example, a thunderstorm and a tornado,
Right.
or a blizzard and a snowstorm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's great. I feel like we're getting a mini meteorology lesson
We are a little bit.
right here in our deep dive. And it's not just about sounding knowledgeable.
Right.
It's about being able to interpret those weather reports and forecasts
Absolutely.
accurately, which can be so important for planning and safety, especially when you're traveling to different regions.
Yeah, it's about empowering yourself with that knowledge,
Yay.
using it to navigate the world around you.
Okay, I'm feeling much more confident about my ability to decode those complex weather reports now.
Good.
And it's amazing how much we've learned
We have.
just by exploring, the language we use
Yeah.
to talk about the weather.
It really
They've gone from basic greetings
Yeah.
to discussing these regional variations, extreme weather events, even delving into the science behind it all.
Absolutely.
And we've only just scratched the surface.
There's always more to learn.
Right. I know,
Right.
it's exciting. But for now, I think we've given our listeners a solid foundation
Yeah,
in weather talk,
I agree.
both in terms of language and cultural awareness.
Absolutely. We've covered a lot of ground. But remember, there's always more to learn and discover.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of language learning. It's a lifelong journey
It
of exploration and discovery.
Mm-hmm.
But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah.
I think it's important to revisit a key point that we touched on earlier,
Okay.
which is the importance of adapting our weather talk to different social settings.
Oh, absolutely crucial.
Right.
Yeah.
It's easy to get caught up in the vocab and the grammar,
Right.
but language is ultimately
Yeah.
about communication and connection.
Exactly.
And that means being mindful of our audience
Mm-hmm.
and the context of the conversation.
Absolutely.
So we need to remember that weather talk can be more than just idle chit-chat.
It can be.
Right. It can be a way to build rapport, share experiences, and even spark those meaningful conversations.
And it's a skill that can be honed with practice and awareness
Right.
by paying attention to how people around us talk about the weather. We can pick up on those subtle cues and nuances that make our conversations
Yeah.
more engaging and effective.
So as we move into the final part of our deep dive, let's keep that in mind.
That's
So let's
so-
explore how we can use weather talk to not only convey information, but also to connect with others, share stories, and maybe even build bridges across cultures.
That's the goal.
Welcome back to our final part of this deep dive into weather talk.
We've covered so much ground, from basic vocabulary to idioms, and even how weather can impact different professions.
Right, and I think it's fascinating how we've found so much to say
I know.
about something we experience every single day.
It's true. And yet there's one more layer we can explore,
Okay.
one that connects weather talk to something even deeper. Storytelling.
Storytelling. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
How does weather tie into the art of storytelling? Well, think about it.
Okay.
Weather plays a huge role in setting the scene and the mood in so many stories, both fictional and real.
Right.
A stormy night can heighten suspense.
Okay.
A sunny day can symbolize hope,
Mm-hmm.
and a sudden downpour.
Yeah.
That can create a sense of chaos or
Yeah.
even opportunity.
You're right. I'd never really thought of it that way, but weather is almost like a character itself.
Exactly.
In so many stories.
Yeah.
Shaping events, influencing emotions.
And our source, pasted text, actually points out how people use weather anecdotes
Okay.
to make their stories more vivid and engaging. Think about those classic phrases we hear all the time, like,
Yeah.
it was a dark and stormy night, or
Right.
the sun was shining brightly on the day I met.
It's true.
Yeah.
Those phrases instantly transport us
They do.
to a specific time and place.
They create that backdrop for the events that unfold and really make the story come alive.
And by incorporating those weather details
Yeah.
into our own personal anecdotes, we can make them more relatable
Absolutely.
and memorable. Instead of just saying, I had a great time at the beach,
Right.
you could say, the sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange as we strolled along the beach.
Much better.
Right.
Much more evocative.
Yeah.
It's like you've painted a mental picture for the listener.
It shows that you're not just reciting facts.
Right.
You're sharing a moment,
Yeah,
an experience, a story.
exactly. And that's what makes a conversation truly memorable and meaningful.
This has been such an insightful deep dive.
It has.
I feel like I've not only expanded my vocabulary, but also gained a whole new perspective
I agree.
on how we use language,
Yeah.
particularly when we're talking about something as universal as the weather.
Absolutely. It's amazing how a seemingly simple topic
Right.
can reveal so much about culture, communication, and even the human experience.
And the best part is it's something we can all continue to explore and learn from.
Absolutely. So the next time you find yourself chatting about the weather, remember, it's more than just small talk.
Right.
It's a chance to connect, share stories, and even discover some new perspectives.
That's a perfect note to end on.
It is.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive
Yeah, thanks for having me.
into the world of weather talk. Until next time, stay curious and keep those conversations flowing. See you next time.